It used to be so simple. You were a boy or you were a girl. But that was then. And this,
The next battleground, transgender rights,
is now.
Born both a boy and a girl.
As we find ourselves in the midst of a gender revolution.
She's like, I'm not a boy. I'm a girl in my heart and my brain.
There are areas in the brain that correlate with gender identity.
When Ellie, who was then your son, said that, is that a little scary?
And then the doctor came over and said, well, sometimes babies are not quite a girl and not quite a boy. She would need surgery.
These are human rights violations on intersex kids' bodies.
There's evidence that seems to show trans brains are in fact different.
And I use he, him, his.
I use they, them, their. I am plural.
This is not just one individual, but a whole group of kids.
At times, do you feel like, whoa, 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 it's too fast, it's making me dizzy? What about your mom and dad? Do they call you Brian now?
They call me D.
Do you wish they'd call you Brian?
Yes.
A lot of us don't even have the strength to report a crime.
Well, I want to empower other women like us.
Your case is going to be heard before the Supreme Court.
I'm looking for the same opportunities that my peers enjoy every single day, and that includes using the same restroom.
I said, goodbye, Bill, and she became Kate. If you love someone, you're willing to do what it takes.
There are people in these societies, they recognize more than two genders.
We're all a lot more complicated than we've assumed.
Ladies and gentlemen, one more time, Katie Couric is here. Let's hear it. Thank you so much. Katie, thank you so much for being here. Congratulations on this wonderful documentary.
Thank you for this nice backdrop. I really appreciate it, and for showing the trailer. Thank you.
Of course. I mean, I really appreciate that you made this, that you explored this topic. How did it come up for you?
You know, I've been very interested in gender roles and gender in general for a long time, and for the past couple of years, I noticed that gender issues were getting a lot of attention in the press. Every day there was a new article or headline about gender. There was an article, articles about transgender children. And I think thanks to Caitlyn Jenner in many ways, even though some people in the community don't feel as if she represents all of them, and she's in, very sort of special circumstances in terms of her wealth and celebrity and access.
Particular political views that many people in the
community
feel like
which
are
is
at
also
odds with them.
That's very interesting too. But I just thought I want to understand this evolution that I'm seeing before my eyes, or revolution. And then my daughter Carrie is a junior in college, and she's told me, very casually, that in their discussion classes, that you go around the room and you tell your classmates your name and your pronoun. And I thought, wow, there's something really, truly transformational happening in our culture, and I just wanted to understand it. And so I went on this journey, which is such a cheesy word and so overused, but I wanted to explore this issue. And I thought by someone like me, someone who's grown up in a very, very binary, culture with that kind of very strict, rigid paradigm, that if I kind of treated the subject with respectful curiosity as someone who's been conditioned to see the world in a certain way, then I could hopefully bring other people with me. And I think people are always afraid of what they don't understand, so I just wanted to shed some light on real people who are dealing with these issues, struggles, and celebrating their gender identity.
I think one thing that you do so well in the documentary is that you show going into anything with respectful curiosity opens your mind to it, and it makes it so that there's something that you don't have to be afraid of at that point, because you went into it with respect and also curious to learn. And you did what great allies always do to any marginalized community, which is you listened.
I listened, and I also, I tried to ask questions that people unfamiliar with the topic might ask, in a respectful way. And I think that was very helpful too. And I found that, many people were more than happy to talk with me and to explain things. And it's funny because I went to a screening in Washington on Monday night, and I started working on this project this past summer. And even watching the film now, sometimes I'm like, I can't believe I asked that question, because I have evolved so much myself in a very short period of time. And I talked to Sarah McBride, who works for the Human Rights Campaign and was the first transgender person to speak at a national political convention at the DNC this summer, and I interviewed her there. But I talked to her and I said, Sarah, I'm kind of embarrassed because I kind of sound like an idiot at certain places, or things that I really take for granted now, I was just learning a few months ago. And she said for social movements, it's really helpful to see someone go through an evolution. And she said for gay marriage, it was actually very productive for the movement to have President Obama evolve on the issue. Because I think when people see other people evolve, they think, well, that gives them room and space to evolve as well, which I just thought was very interesting. Because she said, if I had started this documentary, like, let me tell you, and I know this, and I know that, and this is the way it is, that it would have been really off-putting and almost too in your face for people who weren't familiar with the topic.
As you were evolving while making the documentary, did you ever find yourself hitting a wall or bumping into something that it was hard for you to wrap your head around?
I mean, let's see. I mean, yes. I mean, I think initially when I interviewed the Fords and they introduced me to their daughter Ellie, who at 4 said to her parents, she was biologically assigned a male at birth, said, Mom, I'm a girl in my heart and in my brain. I think for a lot of people, it was hard to understand how someone that young would know with such certainty what her gender assignment felt, what gender assignment felt right to her. And like any parent, I was sort of like, gosh, kids, how could a child that young know? And through experts and talking to psychologists and talking to her parents, I learned that there are certain guideposts that help families determine that in fact is true, and it's being consistent, insistent, and persistent. And still trying to figure out for parents what a phase is, because interestingly enough, Ellie's brother Ronnie went through a period where he liked to dress in girls' clothes, which is very typical sort of a developmental behavior for a certain age, and then stopped doing it. But they said with Ellie, they had a very different kid. And I think it's so easy to judge. It's so easy to judge everyone today. Everyone judges everyone, and it's so hard, I think. Our culture is so mean, I think, and judgmental. And I think once you get inside these people's lives and their family and know that they just love their kids and want to do what's right for their children, you have a lot more compassion and understanding for how difficult it is to come to this conclusion and to help the child.
You have this incredible footage in the film of this young trans man, teenager, who spoke on his own behalf at a city council meeting. And it's unbelievable.
Yeah, school board, I think. In Gloucester, Virginia, Gavin Grimm, right?
Gavin Grimm, yeah. And you have his footage, him speaking eloquently or beautifully about what he's going through and just sort of trying to use the bathroom.
Right.
And then you have parents speaking out against him with vitriol and anger. And you talk about how your daughter sort of they go around and they sort of go by they state which pronoun they go by. Did you find while making this documentary that for millennials or for the younger generation, sort of coming to grips with gender fluidity is almost like not like an afterthought?
Oh, there is a huge generational divide. Where young people, millennials, according to one survey, 50% of millennials think gender is on a spectrum. And I think young people just are not as focused or preoccupied, if you will, on sort of this notion of gender binary. And, I saw that at Yale when I talked to some of the students there. I went and interviewed them. I see it with my daughter, who I mentioned is a junior. She goes to Stanford, and one of her very close friends is transitioning right now and joined a fraternity, and I found that fascinating. And how I'm sure this isn't true. I mean, I'm not being completely Pollyannish, but how many of the students are completely embracing of this person becoming who she really feels she is. And I think there is a huge generational divide, which is also illustrated in a conversation between Renee Richards, who is a real pioneer, one of the first transgender individuals, who was this incredible tennis player who's 82, and Hari Neff, who
I have to say, that was, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. When you say 82 in the film, I was blown away.
Really?
Yeah, did not look 82 to me.
Oh, she'll be so happy to hear that. I'm gonna repeat that.
Let her know that. When you said 82, I almost spit water out of my mouth.
Well, it was interesting because Renee is somebody, who, as I said, was on the front lines of this. I don't think we have a picture of Renee, but a lot of people here know who Renee Richards is. If not, you all should look her up because she's a pretty extraordinary person. But even with her conversation with Hari Neff, who is a model and an actor in Transparent, they have a very different perspective on gender. And it's kind of funny to see their interaction, but I think it's as I said, very illustrative of this generational divide between someone of Renee's generation, even my generation, and someone, Hari, I think is 23 years old.
Now, the film itself, with the exception, I think, of the footage of the parents in that town council, city, I forgot it.
Yeah, I think it's probably, no, that's okay. I think because it's Gloucester, Virginia, it's kind of a small town, so I think it was a school board meeting.
School board meeting, with the exception of those
but I'm not
parents,
even positive about that, but I think so.
We don't see much of the opposition towards the sort of...
Yeah, a little bit on with the North Carolina bathroom ban. We show some protests and things like that. It's not a, this is one side, this is the other side. What I tried to achieve with this documentary is just an intimate look at people who are living their lives. And I did question Gavin with some of the opposition in the town, that it's against their religion to have these bathroom, have him allowed to use the boys' bathroom, or that there were a couple of other things that I said to him, he talked very eloquently about separation of church and state and public policy. I mean, he's just an amazing person.
He's a 15-year-old at that meeting.
Well, a 15-year-old,
yeah.
He was so self-possessed and so impressive. I mean, you watch it and my daughter and I, my other daughter who's 25, we watched it and she started crying. She was so moved by how extraordinary he was. But this wasn't like, this is what one side thinks, this is what the other side thinks. This was, something's happening here in our culture. Our perception, definition of gender is changing. And this is why, and here are examples.
What does it feel like to have, I imagine you've been working on this piece for the last, year and a half?
You're so nice to say that because it was like 4 months. It was
4 months.
Very,
wow.
Yeah, I approached National Geographic. Well, as I mentioned, I've been kind of really interested in this, and I'll tell you in a minute, Ricky, what also made me interested. But I asked the folks at National Geographic, who are really changing the branding and the ethos of this iconic publication and company, because I think they're seeing an opportunity to explore not only places and outer space, but they want to explore sort of the human psyche. They want to explore ideas. They want to explore trends and why we are the way we are. So I went to see them because I'd met the new head of National Geographic, who's this total badass woman named Courtney Monroe, and I'd met her at Morgan Freeman's premiere of his God series. And I said, I'd love to talk to you about some projects. So I went down, I said, I'm really interested in gender. She said, well, isn't that a coincidence? We're doing a whole issue on gender. So that was in May, I think. So I really started shooting the documentary in earnest, I think in August. So I only had about 4 months, and I was covering the campaign. So I was doing a lot of these shoots on the side and kind of carving out a day here or there, going out on the weekends and crisscrossing the country to talk to all these families. Wow. Yeah, so it was a really truncated time frame.
So 4 months, still, that is 4 months ago. This last month, we are living in a sort of different world where it seems like our priorities are a little bit different. You know, I would never call myself an ally of any community because I think, you know, that's up to them to sort of define me as some kind of an ally. But I like to live as if, you know, as if I was an ally. And even I said after the election, you know, a friend of mine and I were like, we were ready to fight for transgender bathroom rights, and all of a sudden we were like, ooh, maybe there are other things that we need to start fighting for first. It seems like a lot of stuff is going to get taken away. What does it feel like to sort of put out a very forward-thinking, in my opinion, a very forward-thinking documentary at a time that it feels like culturally we're looking backwards, or, yeah, we're looking backwards?
Well, you know, I sort of think there's never a bad time to put out something that makes people think, reconsider their long-held positions, and makes them care, right? So, you know, it is interesting, the timing. I think so many people were surprised by the election, but someone asked me that recently. Gosh, we have to worry about a Supreme Court justice, there's immigration policy, there's so many things, as you say, on the docket of concerns for a lot of people. And I can't think of a better time to talk about people and to hopefully generate tolerance for a community. Because I think what we're seeing is this tendency to otherize all sorts of different groups and marginalize all sorts of different groups. And so to me, it's really critically important that we give everyone who's been marginalized or is in the process of being marginalized a voice. And you know, the timing was just sort of, I don't know if you'd call it serendipitous, because I'm not sure that's appropriate, you know, accurate, but it is what it is, and you know, I'm just really proud of the film.
Yeah, absolutely. On that note, I am kind of curious how you feel about the news's role right now with this administration. I mean, you were a host on the Today Show, which is for a number of years, which is sort of like a morning news program, but also a program to sort of give people some entertainment and some news as well.
Yeah, we did I did a lot of really serious, hard-hitting interviews on that show. I remember interviewing David Duke and really letting him have it, and doing all the presidential candidates. And
don't say David Duke right now. I can't handle it.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, I challenged him, and I remember my dad calling me afterwards because I read his quotes back to him about Jews belonging in the ash bin of society and all these horrific things that he had said. And I remember my dad used to call me sometimes after I did the Today Show, because my dad was a print journalist and cared deeply about social justice. And he'd be like, that was a real Edward R. Murrow moment. I'm so proud of you. You know, I think other people watching were like, oh my God, what happened to her? Because they thought it was nice and perky. But, you know, I did a lot of very serious interviews on that program for 15 years. And then when I was at CBS, obviously, I did a lot of important political interviews, like with Sarah Palin, for example. So, you know, I think, you know, so I think that we have a really critically important role to serve in a democracy. A free press is, you know, such an important institution in a democracy. And I think we have to keep holding the administration accountable. This whole effort to marginalize the press, and as you said, Ricky, behind the scenes, you know, prop up other press outlets,
right-wing national
outlets,
outlets,
right, that would perhaps support some of the administration's policies, is a really dangerous precedent. And I think, you know, I don't think sometimes we forget how lucky we are to live in a country with a free press, where we can hold, you know, speak truth to power and all that stuff, and comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable, and all the things that we are charged with doing. And I think right now the press is really still finding its way, because, you know, as the media landscape has become increasingly fragmented, everybody's fighting for ratings or clicks or whatever it is. And oftentimes that's equated with access. So you can only have access if you're not going to be too critical, right? So it's a real double-edged sword. And so I think outlets like the Washington Post and the New York Times and, are doing a great job of really holding people accountable and not necessarily for their ideology, but for their accuracy and their policies, and if in fact they are consistent with our values, which I think is really important.
Absolutely, 100%. I'll just say when I wasn't going to end with the Today Show. I was going to go over your resume a little bit more and say that you have a varied history when it comes to journalism.
Did I sound defensive? I don't mean to.
I felt bad ending.
No, don't.
Because you have such a rich history when it comes to journalism and the different ways that we cover stories, be it via the Today Show, which is obviously you are covering stories for the widest audience possible, and then with CBS, you were doing hard-hitting news at times, a different kind of hard-hitting news. Before that, you've been a local anchor, you've been a network anchor.
Never a local anchor.
They would never
let me anchor. No, because I was kind of not the anchor type. I was sort of the
from...
scrappy street reporter. And I always wanted to anchor, but I was really, really bad at it. And one time they gave me a chance to do it in local news in Washington, D.C. I was with WRC, the NBC affiliate there. And they were like, okay, you can give it a try. So they had me come in to do the morning cut-ins, like those little local news things that are during, you probably all don't watch television because you all look pretty
like
young.
Albert Brooks and
No.
News.
But I was moving the prompter myself, had to write it, edit it. It was like I had to do everything myself. And all I know is I was talking, and they had gone to a commercial break like 30 seconds earlier. So the guy, I said to my news director, do you think I could ever anchor the morning cut-ins again? He said, maybe if you go to a really, 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 really small market somewhere. So I was terrible. And then I remember when I went to NBC, I filled in for Garrick Utley on the weekend nightly news, and I saw him in the hallway because the local station and the network shared a building. And I said, hey, is the entire nation a small enough market for you?
Nice.
Boom.
I have to ask, you mentioned that your father's a print journalist, and he would say that's an Edward R. Murrow moment. Clearly, you grew up in a home where journalism and storytelling was sort of at the forefront, and you championed it. What is it like for you on a personal level to see the press and journalism like the New York Times and the Washington Post, which I think are sacred institutions, to be attacked the way that they are?
Well, I think they just have to stay strong. Listen, it's hard when people write critical stuff about you, and it's I think a very primal instinct to dismiss those publications or whatever it is and, say they're dead to me. And I think that they just had their institutions, and I really pray that they don't go away because, and I don't think they will. And I think public broadcasting, the networks, I think sometimes they do a good job, sometimes they could do better. But all of these institutions that, are so, I think, also sacred. But, it's difficult when you mix art and commerce, and the bottom line is the bottom line. And, I think you have to constantly balance that. But I really hope that people err on the side of strong journalism that holds people accountable.
What's it been like for you to go from sort of producing field pieces that you were producing before, maybe 3, 5, 7 minutes, to being able to produce, an hour and a half long film about one subject?
It's so exciting to me because I feel that I understand sort of the marketplace, but unfortunately the marketplace isn't the marketplace of ideas anymore. It's the marketplace of clickbait and headlines. And yes, you can find long, thoughtful pieces on The Atlantic. I read The Economist, and obviously The Times and The Post and National Review. You want to get all different perspectives. But, I think that you have an opportunity, and I think people are hungry for something that's deeper and more substantive and more meaningful.
I think so too.
And I think that's evidenced by the popularity of podcasts. I do a podcast, please subscribe for everyone, called Katie Couric, How Original. But, you know, some of them are 45 minutes long, and maybe it's because you can do other things while you're listening to podcasts and you don't have to be completely focused. But, you know, those are single subject conversations that people listen to. So I'm really heartened by this notion that that people want to experience deeper dives and want to understand things better, because I think, you know, we have to have an educated electorate to sustain our democracy. We have to have people who are informed. And, you know, a real problem is these sort of echo chambers where you're watching the news. Basically, a friend of mine calls it affirmation, not information.
Tribal affirmation, yeah.
Yeah, and, you know, I think we in the media really have to take a good hard look at what we're doing, how we're doing, and how we can do it better.
I'm going to ask you the hardest question that people ask me all the time since I've been interviewing people. You've been doing it a little bit longer than me. What was your greatest interview? It's a really hard question when people ask me, because you do so many.
It's sort of like, what is your favorite meal? Yeah. You know,
French fries.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
No, but do you remember when you had it where? You know, it's sort of like, how do you pick? Because I've done so many interviews that, for different reasons, have meant a lot. For different reasons, have had an impact. For different reasons, you know, I will always remember them.
I thought of it because you brought up the podcast, and clearly, as someone who enjoys interviewing other people, the podcast had to have been something for you where it's like, I want an unfiltered, long-form interview format, which is a little bit different for you. So I would imagine you were looking to get something different out of interviews that maybe you hadn't gotten before.
Well, I think podcasts afford an opportunity for this, for intimacy. I think that's why Howard Stern, people kind of bare their soul to Howard sometimes, because they don't have to worry about, you know, how do I look, or my body language, or my expression, and they can kind of relax. I mean, not too much, because then that's dangerous, but they can relax and sort of have this conversation that feels unfiltered. I think Howard is endlessly curious about people. So podcasting, I think, affords that kind of environment and intimacy. So it's fun. But I think, you know, one of the reasons I do a podcast, I've become, I think by necessity, kind of a multimedia person, or multi-platform, because the landscape is so fractured. I think you reach different people doing different things. So I have a cooking series. I'm doing a web series that I just launched, where I'm learning to cook like quick, healthy, delicious meals with my husband and the chef from Sur La Table, Joel Gammeren, because I care about food and health and nutrition. I did a documentary called Fed Up about childhood obesity. So we thought this would be fun. And you have endless real estate online. It's not like, oh my God, I hope it gets picked up by a TV station. It doesn't really matter. So you distribute it through your social media channels, through other avenues, and you find an audience, whether it's big or small. It's an audience that's enjoying and learning something from you. And similarly, I'm doing the podcast. I'm working at Yahoo doing big interviews like Ed Snowden or Ruth Bader Ginsburg or Betty White recently on her 95th birthday. And so, you know, I think all these things not only satisfy different aspects of my personality and curiosities, but it's also a way to get news and information and, you know, content to a wide array of consumers.
I saw an interview with Ruth Bader Ginsburg today live online, and my first thought all the time now when I see an interview with Ruth Bader Ginsburg is like, she's looking healthy. All right.
A friend of mine told me that Ruth Bader Ginsburg said to him, I know what I need to do. And I think that's basically meant she needs to live. And keep doing planks.
I'm glad that you're not laughing.
No. She needs to stay
true.
healthy. And, you know, it's interesting because, you know, it will be interesting to see what happens. And, you know, you have to say there are a lot of Americans who want the balance of the court to change, you know, who would not be upset if she retired, or if Anthony Kennedy is really more of a swing voter, retired. And, you know, I think what's important is to have a conversation with people who have very different philosophies, political philosophies and ideologies, and things that they hold near and dear to their heart. And I think you have to be able to have a conversation and have that same respectful curiosity when dealing with people who disagree with you or who may come from a different point of view, because oftentimes they're not ogres, or somebody described it to me this afternoon as knuckle scrapers or whatever. It's just, people have serious differences of opinions, and somehow we've lost our ability to honor different opinions without kind of having this mob mentality. I'm not saying we should tolerate certain things, racism, anti-Semitism, misogyny, and all that, and sometimes those are the underpinnings of certain points of view, but we should also, I think, find a place to receive and listen to people who may have opinions that are different.
I agree with you 100%. I would bring back the idea of the echo chamber, though, and say the echo chambers that were created have made it, and I do have to go to the audience for questions. I see you giving me the look. The echo chambers have made it difficult to bridge those gaps because they've cut off the supply of facts.
Plus, you've heard a lot, I'm sure, about the coastal-rural divide or the exurbs, and I think, Brian Stevenson, I moderated a panel at Stanford on race, and he talked about the important, you guys should go online and get his speech. I think he's just so compelling. I think he wrote Just Mercy. He works for the Southern Poverty Law Center, and I don't know, he's my hero. And he talked,
TLC, love him.
He talked about the importance of being proximate. And I think, we are all in our little echo chambers, whatever is the geographic equivalent of an echo chamber, where we're not interacting with people who are really different than we are. And we're not seeing people, I mean, I guess that's, in New York City, it's a diverse melting pot, but we have to, I don't know, we just aren't around people who are in different circumstances, whether it's socioeconomic or cultural or geographic. And I think that's really exacerbated the divide that we're seeing in our country right now. I have no idea what I'm talking about, but it sounds pretty good, doesn't it?
Very well articulated.
Whenever you use exacerbate, I think, oh, that was a good word. Not really, that's not.
Who has questions out here? Right here.
Hello, Ms. Couric. Hi. I wanted to know, as a journalist, is it difficult to not be biased when you're covering a story that you're really passionate about?
It is. It can be very difficult not to be biased, but I also think that, again, what I was saying earlier about having an open mind, trying, as Atticus Finch said, and I think Barack Obama quoted, you have to, it wasn't walk in someone's shoes. It was actually got to get inside someone's skin, which I think is kind of Hannibal Lecter and creepy when in retrospect. But
modify the quote to shoes.
Yeah. But I think empathy is the most important quality of being a good journalist, because you may have certain held beliefs, and we all do. We're human. But I also think the ability to empathize and to understand someone else's circumstances and where they're coming from, and be able to hear them, really hear them, is very, very important. And that's something that I've tried to do throughout my career.
Absolutely. I think we have time for one more question, which is my fault, and I apologize.
We can let that lady ask one, too.
I think so, too.
Okay, hi.
Hi, I'm Robert. There has been accusations that current Vice President Mike Pence supports gay conversion therapy. What are your initial thoughts about gay conversion therapy?
I think, well, I don't know a great deal about gay conversion therapy, but certainly my understanding is it doesn't work. And it's something that many people find highly offensive. But so that's really all I can say about it. And I think it's I think very emblematic of this divide that the country is in, that we have, I know that there are certain beliefs that he has that I'm familiar with. The gay conversion, I'm not that familiar with, but it sounds like it would be in keeping with some of his other sort of philosophies.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
Nah. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. And I want to say I think you're the perfect person to be doing this documentary on National Geographic because of your persona, because of who you are, because you're not coming into it with any preconceived notions about what the transgender community is. You came in with curiosity and empathy, as you said. I wanted to ask you what you feel about alternative facts and outright lying and President Trump's use of social media.
Well, I think the first part, alternative facts and outright lying, is obviously wrong and incredibly terrifying. Because I think, what did Tip O'Neill say? Everyone's entitled to their own opinions, but you're not entitled to your own facts.
Yeah, the definition of opinion has been modified in the past couple of years, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's, I think fair-minded Americans can't stand for that. And I think when you start blurring these lines of fact and fiction and reality and I guess what is the opposite of reality? Fantasy. It's really, really dangerous. And I think when you have somebody in a position of authority doing that, it's very, very dangerous and scary. And what was the other part of the question? The alternate facts and...
Yeah, the alternate facts, and I think I've forgotten what the other part is. President Trump's use of social media.
Oh.
Particularly Twitter.
Well, I think that's really, it's really, really interesting. This whole notion of disintermediation did not begin with President Trump or even candidate Trump. But I think it shows that in this fractured media landscape, that sometimes you can go directly to a certain segment of the population, unedited, unfiltered, and unchallenged. And I think it's a real dilemma for the media. How do you deal with this? Do you spend your whole day, sharing tweets and then debunking tweets or not? So I think it's effective. Do I think it's good for the country? Not particularly.
It's also not just, I think so often that question, and not your question, but when people talk about it, they talk about the platform. What do you think about him using Twitter? And it's like, it's fine. It's not someone using it. It's how they're using it. And the way that he's using it is he is not just putting out news or putting out right. positive messages. He's using it to bully people, to shut people down, and to put out alternative facts, which is really the problem and the dilemma for
right,
media.
Right. I think when, as I said, you have somebody of authority doing that, then that's a real problem. And I think we've seen the ultimate disruption of the media landscape, and we're all trying to, I think, figure out how to handle it, how to manage it, what our roles and responsibilities are. And I think it's still a work in progress, frankly.
Katie, it's been an honor talking to you. Thank you so much for
you.
being here.
Thanks
The Gender Revolution, A Journey with Katie Couric, premieres Monday night at 9 on National Geographic. Katie, thank you so much.
Thank you. And can I just say that if anybody's interested in the documentary or they feel that it would be useful, I know the Yale kids said to my producer, gosh, I wish our parents would ask the questions that Katie just asked us. And if you think it would be useful and you think it's an important topic, I hope you'll tell your friends and your family and anyone you see on the street, and we're a billboard, I'm kidding, but encourage people to watch it, and if you can, share the trailer, which I thought Nat Geo did a beautiful job, and I thought it was really moving, because I hope this documentary finds an audience. I hope the audience finds this documentary, because I do think it can not only deepen our understanding, but potentially save lives, because there are a lot of people out there who don't feel they have someplace to turn. They're confused, they're lonely, and the rate of suicide among transgender people is 40%, 41% actually, as compared to 4.6% for the rest of the population. So I think it has the potential to really do something incredibly positive out in the world. So I'm trying to get as many people as possible to watch it. So thank you all for your interest. I really appreciate it.
Katie Couric, everybody. Katie, thank you.